Look out! Here comes the Spider-Man! With great power comes a great beatdown.
People have asked me for the longest time, what's your deal with Spider-Man? What is it about him that appeals to you so much? And for the longest time I've given them answers directing them to the animated series, or even to the image of the character if they've never seen it. And then, occasionally I'll direct them to the PlayStation 1 classic, known as Spider-Man 2000. The game was developed by Neversoft and published by Activision. It was released around August of 2000, and as a kid, it was really difficult to not get excited by this. I mean, superhero games at the time weren't really taking off, and the only substance we had to supply our superheroic needs was, well, yeah. Nonetheless, this is Spider-Man 2000. The game starts off with Peter Parker attending a science expo being hosted by none other than now newly reformed ex-supervillain Dr. Otto Octavius, or Doc Ock. He begins to explain what science can do for mankind while exhibiting his new piece of technology while Eddie Brock snaps pictures of him for the Daily Bugle. Then suddenly another rogue Spider-Man appears and steals Doc Ock's device. While the place ensues in total chaos, Peter, wondering what he just saw, tries to suit up and combat the other Spider-Man, but just can't get free of the crowd. He ends up stumbling into Eddie Brock, who can just barely make out who he saw. Brock, still focused on the job, just forgets what happened and continues snapping photos of Spider-Man being a criminal for Jonah to just eat his heart out. That is, up until the fake Spidey sees what he's doing and smashes his camera. The fake Spidey then escapes, and Brock sits at the empty arena feeling like a failure, until the symbiote, known as Venom, possesses over Brock's body. In a fit of rage, he begins to swear that he'll make Spider-Man pay for ruining Brock's life. Again. We then get two silhouettes of easily recognizable characters, wonder who those can be, flooding the lower half of New York City with a deadly gas. How they did this, I have no fucking clue. And thus, this sets the game in motion. Spidey now has to race against time and the police in order to prove his innocence. But before he can do so, he's confronted by the Black Cat, who informs him that the bank is being robbed, and of course, there's hostages. So Spidey, being the good Samaritan that he is, decides to go save the day. After foiling the bank robbery, he then calls J. Jonah Jameson to inform him that he somehow managed to get pictures of Spider-Man in action. Totally inconspicuous. Jonah, however, is under attack by Scorpion and urges Pete to call the police. Peter, of course not listening, makes his way over to the Bugle, fights Scorpion, and saves Jonah, who isn't pleased about this at all. He then sicks the police on Spider-Man, who then meets Daredevil on top of a roof. Daredevil begins to question Spider-Man about his motives, and Spidey essentially spills the beans. Daredevil believes him because that's his power, I guess, and says he's going to spread his innocence amongst the hero community, which then sets in motion the most overdone police chase I've ever seen. I mean, holy shit, just look at this. Oh! After narrowly avoiding the police, Spider-Man is once again greeted by Black Cat, who informs him that both Rhino and Venom are causing mayhem, and that Venom is actually on the Jumbotron in Times Square with a message for him. Spidey then goes to investigate and finds out that Venom, within all that time, has abducted Spider-Man's wife, Mary Jane Parker, and she only has 24 hours to live. A conflicted Spidey now has to make the choice between chasing down Rhino and helping out all the people who are under his rampage, or ultimately hunting down Venom and reclaiming his wife, but ultimately decides that others come before him and gives an entire speech about great power and great... Yeah, you've heard it before. So, with that being said, he goes to hunt down Rhino first. They approach the location of the Rhino, who then sneak attacks Black Cat, knocking her out momentarily. Spidey then fights the Rhino and defeats him. And after he defeats him, he then seeks Doc Ock, coming to assess the damage and personally jail and restrain Rhino. He then changes into Peter Parker to check up on the condition of Black Cat, seeming that the police are all over the place, and they want his head on a platter. Black Cat, who is being attended to by the paramedics, tries to give Peter a warning, but before she can do so, has the door abruptly shut in her face, and is hauled off to the hospital. Or so that's what the game wants you to think, as we get the two ominous figures again. We then come across yet again another conflicted Spider-Man with no idea what to do, as Mary Jane is still being held captive, and the Black Cat has officially gone missing. His good friend, the Human Torch, sits up top of the Statue of Liberty, giving him a bit of advice and tells him that Venom will eventually find him, and to have faith. Spidey, taking his advice, sets off the swing when Venom coincidentally finds him right after the two just had a talk. The two then get into a race, although it was never really a race, it was just really about keeping up with him, as the two tear through a building and Venom goes through a billboard, George of the Jungle style. Spidey and Venom then duke it out, with Spider-Man momentarily gaining the upper hand. Venom, however, realizes this and retreats into the sewers, luring Spider-Man into what is known as one of the most frustrating levels in the entire game. You guys know what I'm talking about. That goddamn train sequence. Holy shit, is there so much frustration to be had in just this one level. Not only do you have the annoyingly new enemy type known as the Lizardmen, who love to spit acid at you from afar and put you in a paralyzed-like state with a grab, but hitting them on this narrow-ass platform will ultimately lead to your death due to Spider-Man trying to track the enemy but falling off, causing a game over. It's frustrating, and even if you do manage to maintain control of where you are, you lose a considerable amount of health here. With the power-ups being too far in between and hard to get without again losing your placing and falling off, you will die countless amounts of times here. Ugh. After some more sewer chasing and puzzle solving, Spidey finally meets up with Venom once again, who has his wife captured and dangling for dear life under some very deep water. It's up to Spidey to fight Venom once again and save his wife. When he finally does, he reminds Venom back to the day they bumped into each other at the conference, and Venom's memory is jogged, thus clearing Spidey's name, and Venom apologizes for kidnapping his wife. Venom then agrees to help out Spidey to prove his innocence and find out who's really behind everything. So the first place they go to find some clues is the Daily Bugle. And what do you know? The entire place is infested with a symbiote outbreak. Venom once again goes out a window, George of the Jungle style, because he senses carnage. Perfectly logical for a breaking and entering situation. Spider-Man actually makes a joke about this, which is actually pretty funny. After some investigating, it's here that they discover that the imposter Spider-Man was actually Mysterio all along, and he was actually the one setting up the symbiote machines. Spidey and Mysterio duke it out, and then after they finish fighting, Spidey interrogates Mysterio, and he spills the bean on where to find the culprits behind the whole thing. Spidey, now en route to the warehouse, finds a secret passage where he finds Black Cat. He frees her, and then he frees New York of the gas that's plaguing the city below. After this, he then goes after the masterminds. The two masterminds are then to be revealed as Doc Ock and Carnage. Didn't see that coming, did you? The two were working together all along to make human life excel and prosper through symbiosis, and controlling them with the help of Carnage. This was Doc Ock's plan all along. Spidey then warns the two that symbiotes are unstable and uncontrollable, but to no avail. Venom then randomly appears once again, challenging Carnage to a fight, leaving Spidey and Doc Ock to duke it out, with Spider-Man ultimately being the victor. Venom, however, isn't as lucky, as he's sent hurling down, with Spidey now having to deal with Carnage. After the fight, we see the symbiote that's attached to Cletus Cassidy detaches from him. Spider-Man thinks he's actually won, and has a... reflecting on his good day, I guess? When suddenly, holy shit! That's right, ladies and gentlemen, and exclusive to the game, Monster Ock, who I swear gave every single child who played this game a nightmare. This dude's face is scary. But looking at him now, he kind of looks like a pig. Meh. Spidey now has to escape being killed by Monster Ock and having his head on a platter while this entire underground base is being destroyed. He narrowly escapes, though, while Ock was actually caught in the explosion. Ock doesn't die and is actually saved by the symbiote, but he actually lost most of his mechanical limbs. Ock was then later jailed with the rest of the villains, minus Carnage. Probably died in that explosion anyways. Nothing's said about him, so what happened? As we end the game with both the heroes and villains playing card games, making jokes to remind us that this is a kid's game, while the villains reflect on how their plan was a massive failure from the start. And thus that ends Spider-Man's campaign. Looking back at this game, the story is definitely weak, and riddled with plot holes. But part of that actually works in this game's favor. It knows what it is at all times, and even if it isn't an Arkham Asylum-style story, it still has enough charm and charisma to make you want to play through the rest of the game to see what else happens. It gets you invested. It's a comic book game tailored for kids getting off the superhero high from the animated series, and the mere fact that we're playing as Spider-Man is a good enough reason to make any child love this game. So even though the game's story is relatively weak, it still stands to this day. It's passable. It's okay. And it's always a delight to go back and pick it apart and It's incredibly cheesy, and not the greatest, but it's always enjoyable. The game is a simple action-adventure game with simple action controls. You control Spider-Man with the D-pad or the left analog stick, and you jump with X, punch with square, kick with circle, or do web attacks with triangle. While the punches and kicks are usually always the same, you can actually integrate the web attacks differently. Depending on which direction you press on the D-pad or analog stick, your web attack will differ. You'll have your web balls, which impacts and causes pain to the enemy. You have your web brass knuckles, which increases the melee damage on your punches, and the web dome, which can knock back anyone in the surrounding area. You also have web pulls, which to be honest are the clunkiest to do. The reason being is because when you press down or diagonal, your character moves in the direction like he's supposed to do. The only thing is though, after you move, the game then registers the web button, which makes you shoot and waste a web. Which gives me the proper transition to the web and health system. Yes, this game has a health meter and a web system. The health meter is pretty self-explanatory. You get hit, you lose it. Within the level there's health pickups along the way to help you replenish it, but are rather scarce, making you depend on web attacks to slow down or incapacitate your foes. Webbing in this game is also expendable. You can lose your web completely if you're reckless with it. But thankfully, webbing is a lot more convenient than health pickups are. The only setback is webbing disappears at an alarming rate in this game. Literally everything you do in this game has to do with webbing. So even if you're at the max webbing count at 10, chances are by the end of the level you'll be down to 7. And it doesn't help that little things like web swinging to the next platform that's mandatory in this game subtracts from your web account. Which brings up another topic. The difficulty. It's segregated into 4 modes. Easy, normal, hard, and kid mode. While the game isn't particularly too challenging, it does offer some frustration due to some really questionable level design and faulty camera angles, which till this day still hasn't been addressed in any Spider-Man game. And don't even get me started on the cheap-ass symbiotes. My god, if there's any enemy type in this game that I dread encountering, it's these guys. They have everything a lizardman has with the exception of escaping through the roof to avoid getting hit. And of course, they hit you out of your own combos. They also have an extended hitbox, making them even more frustrating to deal with. Ugh, I hate these guys. Boss fights, however, are generally simple, and offer a variety to them. They always usually have you doing something other than just mercifully beating the hell out of some baddies, which is always a good thing, so it doesn't become boring and mundane. As for the levels themselves, well, they're actually pretty varied, which to me is the way a Spider-Man game should always be. You have your linear-based levels, yeah, where you just progress on forward and get to the end, but you also have a couple of levels that actually require you to use some critical thinking and solve puzzles. You also have a couple of mazes in there and some races, so it's pretty varied as opposed to how Spider-Man games of today feel that you need to walk into a room and take out about 100 guards every single time. And each level sticks out due in part to the music. It sets a tone, pace, and atmosphere, which is an exceptional job trying to tell the game's story. The legendary Tommy Tallarico did a really good job composing for the music for this game. One of my all-time favorites being the police chase music, which sets an entirely tense atmosphere, and it feels like you're actually getting chased down with some kick-ass music in the background. Speaking of sound, the voice acting in this game is superb. Definitely the highlight. Rino Romano does a really good job voicing Spider-Man in this game. And while people have often stated that Spider-Man sounds a bit unnatural and overenthusiastic, I think he holds up pretty nice here, and he gives a really good performance. I mean, it's not easy being the new guy, and Reno was essentially that. Many people were coming off the cuffs of the Fox Kids animated series and were used to having Christopher Daniel Barnes as Spider-Man. So Reno had some really big shoes to fill to the people who were coming off of that and expecting more from the new guy. And, well, like I said, I think he did really well. Ephraim Zimbalist Jr. does an outstanding job reprising his role from the 90s animated series as Doc Ock. Seriously, if you guys ever watch the cartoon, there is no one else in the world whose voice you'll probably hear in your head when you're reading the character of Ock than his. The only really issue I have with him, well, isn't really with him. It's with the game itself. Sometimes it's really tough to hear or understand him due to the rest of the game being extremely loud and his lines being said really soft-spokenly. Again, it's not really a character complaint, it's mostly just the game. Darren Norris, better known as Cosmo from the Fairly Odd Parents or the janitor from Ned's Declassified School Survival Guide, pretty much does everyone in this game, and I mean everyone. He ranges from doing Venom to Scorpion, Mysterio, the Human Torch, Captain America, Punisher. I mean, hell, this game should have really been called Darren Norris 2000. And even with the wide range of characters he has to play, he somehow manages to pull them all off really well. with his best performance of course being Venom. Never before have I ever heard a Venom that sounded more menacing and threatening than this one. And part of that is due to because I swear there's no voice augmentation being done to the character. It's all natural from Norris, which is outstanding to think. And at the beginning of the game, he legitimately creeped the hell out of me.
I tried to fight it. Can't fight it anymore! Again, innocence falls prey to the evil of Spider-Man. Rest easy, Brock. Venom is here. And if it's the last thing we ever do, Jameson and the insect are gonna pay.
That is until, of course, he became a comic relief to take back some of the seriousness from the beginning to remind us once again that this is indeed, ladies and gentlemen, a kid's game. This probably bummed out a lot of hardcore Venom's fans, but to be honest, I think Durand Norris more than made up for it. He does a really good job, probably my favorite.
Surf the web, surf the web.
Shut up, Brock. We don't have time.
Jennifer Hale also reprises her roles as Black Cat and Mary Jane from the 90s animated series and from Spider-Man Unlimited, respectively. And, well, what can I say? It's Jennifer Hale, one of the premier A-list voice actors in the industry. While these two characters aren't as predominant as the others, they are in the game and serve something to the plot, so I might as well mention them. I personally think she does an okay job. And what I mean by okay is I just wish they used her a little bit more better than being the informant and the damsel in distress twice. A good talent used kind of in the wrong way, personally. But I digress. D. Bradley Baker is another guy who voices a ton of characters in this game. He ranges from Daredevil, the Lizard, Rhino, and of course his lead role as Carnage. While I thought Darren Norris did an exceptional job as Venom, the same can't really be said for Baker. I just can't enjoy his Carnage, guys, on the sheer fact that his voice sounds like a 12-year-old child going on a temper tantrum because he didn't get his cookie. Die! 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 This is supposed to be a character with a psychotic killing background turned into a super dangerous beast with the symbiote attached to him. And I just did not get this vibe at all. And overall, it wasn't pleasant to hear. I mean, it wasn't really that terrible, but it was just something I never, ever really looked forward to. The rest of the characters, minor or not, were really voiced well enough, though, so I guess it's just a minor gripe. And, well, that's all I can really say about this game. This game may not look like it, but it's massive, and especially for a PlayStation 1 game. It's an adventure you'll never ever forget, and I think the back of the game case says it best. You just don't play it, you live it. There's a reason why this game was considered to be one of the best superhero games at its time. You can definitely tell that Neversoft put in a lot of time crafting this game. And I had a ton of fun doing so. I mean, hell, you can even see it in the credits. And that's not even going into all the extra content that went into the game, like unlockable costumes that can give you additional powers, like invincibility, invisibility, and unlimited webbing. Or the training modes, which offer survival-type games, or web-zip training, or even some races, or some web-targeting missions which test your reflexes. And of course, the ever-hilarious and honorable mention to the what-if mode. I am not even going to begin to spoil to you what if mode is. If you've had this game and know what if mode is, you already know what I'm talking about. It definitely adds more to the replayability factor of this game. This game is the blueprint of what games today should actually be, instead of just shamelessly holding off on content for the sake of extra cash through DLC. Even after being a decade old, I can still recommend this game to anyone who wants a PlayStation 1 era gem, or someone who's just getting new to the character. Or even a kid whose favorite superhero is Spider-Man and wants a Spider-Man game. Pretty much anyone who isn't a tight ass or a story Nazi can sit down and enjoy this game for what it is. When good Spidey games were prospering and doing well, Spider-Man 2000 is a damn good time.